delighted to be introducing this session. It's called Teaching Speaking, Brain-Friendly Classroom with GenAI. We have had so many interesting sessions in this strand today. If you've attended some others, you will know, and I'm sure in the coming weeks, you will be able to apply all sorts of new ideas, loads of inspiration for your classroom. And I'm sure this is going to be more of the same with new ideas and new things to take away. So amazing. Ganna Tashchenko is a lecturer at the University of Bordeaux, and she has over a decade of experience teaching in a university setting, and has taught general English and ESP, and also translation-related disciplines. Her current focus lies in exploring the cognitive foundations of language learning and developing strategies to create an environment comfortable for the brain to learn. And I'm sure this will be a fascinating session. I'm going to hand over to you, Ganna, and we'll see you towards the end for a few questions. Okay, over to you.
Thank you very much for a wonderful introduction. Thank you everyone who has joined for this session today. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And I'm very happy to be here with you today. And just share my experiences and my insights from working with students and the use of AI, which could kind of make this kind of work runs more smoothly. So today, I'm going to talk about ways to support our learners in acquiring speaking skills with the help of the new tool that we have at our disposal now. And well, we are only starting to see its potential, but still. So, well, now we have AI and well, I'm not sure that I will mention any new tools that you haven't used already, though perhaps. But today there are a lot of apprehensions going around about the use of AI in teaching, about the use of AI specifically in language teaching and how it could impact the way we work, the way we assess, the way we interact with students, etc. So I will share my ideas about the use of AI, how it could be beneficial from the cognitive point of view, and, well, probably emphasize why the human factor is always there, it is always necessary, and I would say indispensable for learning any language, but specifically for mastering speaking skills. I will basically look at the different needs that students have as their language proficiency is growing, and how AI could help to support those needs, both in and out of the classroom. So basically, at low levels, meaning from like A0 to maybe A2, these are just broad bands, they're not super specific. But at that point in time, students have little to, well, basically no background knowledge. So the cognitive load, the concept that you're probably familiar with, is extremely high. Essentially, we have like a certain amount of cognitive resource or working memory, which is available at a given time to perform a task. Any task, well, including speaking. And it works well, and it is efficient because a lot of our actions in real life, the actions that we perform every day, again, including speaking, are usually automatic. Well, many of them, perhaps not all. However, when we are learning a new language, especially when it is very different from our native language, from any language that we know at that point in time, this cognitive resource is exhausted very, very quickly. So basically, our working memory can process only a certain amount of information at any given point in time. And if the cognitive load, whatever our brain needs to process, is very high, it gets overloaded, essentially. At best, it is just unable to process all the information. At worst, it goes into the fight or flight response, where no learning is possible by default. In order to produce speech, again, as we know, we need to master, well, to some extent at least, pronunciation, form, meaning, and use of a range of linguistic units involved. And they must achieve, well, let's say a certain level of, let's say, automation, which is, for low levels, often not the case. That is why students may recognize certain words when reading or when listening, but they are unable to retrieve them from memory fast enough to be able to speak. And this is okay. It doesn't mean that the brain is not learning. It just means that neural connections, they're not yet strong enough. Yeah, so it takes time for them to get stronger, to for the students to be able to produce language, and for the student to be able to show the knowledge that they are acquiring in the process of learning. So at this moment, we should not probably force our students to speak as much, carefully weighing up what they can already produce, perhaps like some phrases, very short sentences, perhaps some phrases and sentences that have been like drilled into their memory pretty well. But apart from that, it is really better to focus on maximum exposure to the language. We know that our brain is good at recognizing patterns, and it will be doing so even when students themselves do not realize it. So on the other hand, we could pay more attention to individual words, phrases, grammar structures, etc., that over time will reach that level of automation where students will be able and willing, which is more important, to test them in speech. So how AI could help us with that? Let's say we worked on a text or a conversation, listened to it or read it, doesn't matter. And then we want our students to work with a certain number of words, phrases, whatever. So students can be asked to play with AI, both during the class or at home, in order to learn those, again, phrases and linguistic units more efficiently and comfortably, on the basis of various gap fills, matching exercises, anything really. And that requires, well, not so much effort on our part, but is way more efficient for the student. Why it matters? Basically, it is about the psychological safety. So they can make, well, while doing those exercises that they, well, generated, using any tool that they feel comfortable with, as well, an example you can see on the slide, they can use as many tasks as they need. They can make as many mistakes as they need, no judgment. And when we talk about low levels, of course, perhaps we could provide them with some ready-made templates. So again, on the slide, you can see a template, like a prompt that can be used with any other, in fact, like range of vocabulary or anything. So they can just, well, use the templates that we provide at the point where they are not able to, well, generate their own prompts, which would be precise enough, let's say, for the system to provide a coherent answer, let's say. For some languages and some tools, again, some AI tools, students can even write a prompt in their L1, just specifying that the exercise and the testing, the testing part must be in English, of course. Well, here you can basically see another example of a prompt and what ChatGPT, for instance, provided as an exercise. Moreover, if the exercise allows, if it is, for example, a grammar structure, which is not strictly related to any specific topic, students can also specify their preferences in terms of the topic to make it more engaging. So, for instance, they need to generate a gap fill, like a paragraph to fill in the gaps with certain words, or grammar structures again. So they can mention that they prefer, I don't know, a paragraph on, baking or sports or whatever is more interesting and relevant for them. The bottom line here is that at this stage, such activities, similarly having not much to do with speaking, in fact, will help students reach a level that is necessary for speaking, for at least like trying to speak, much faster than making them speak when they are not ready yet and when they really, like, literally can't basically speak. Plus, again, our brain is very good at learning implicitly. Again, our pattern recognition. So by doing those exercises, students get even more exposure to the language, to the target structure, the target language that we want them to cover, but also to a lot of other language. So they can basically adapt, the type of exercise and tailor it to their own needs. Moreover, over time, they will see that, for example, they already know, let's say, the meaning of the word, but they are unsure how to use it in a sentence, or they do not know the correct form for a specific purpose, or they're unsure about pronunciation, whatever. So over time, again, they will ask AI for more specific types of exercises, while also learning to learn. So they will acquire some metacognitive strategies that will help them at each level, at each point in time. And I would say that sometimes it would even hold true for the different subjects and the different topics that they need to cover, not only linguistic ones. So as students are progressing, they're already able to recognize quite a lot of patterns. They already have the background knowledge sufficient to start playing with language, varying accuracy, but still. So the cognitive load is quite high, but it's not no longer excessive. So it is possible to try speaking. And at this point, students are usually, quite willing to try that. So they need to be provided with a space, like a safe space to do that. Here, again, accuracy varies quite a lot because the different patterns have reached different levels of automation. The cognitive load associated with the effort, such as speaking, is still, again, rather high. Plus, when we speak always, even when we speak our native language, we also think about what we want to say. And that requires some cognitive resource as well, obviously. So for the moment, fluency is probably more important than accuracy in terms of, building students' confidence, just as simple as that. And again, making them comfortable speak. And when they're speaking, the students are still experimenting. So probably it would be kind of better to minimize error correction. Just perhaps if you can see that some mistakes are getting fossilized, or if what the student is producing is not exactly understandable, let's say, or it's very difficult to understand. Our cognitive resource here is not yet sufficient to fully control accuracy. Sometimes background knowledge is insufficient to correct all the mistakes. And sometimes the mistakes that the students are making, they are, they hear that they're making them, but they still do just because, again, our cognitive resource, our working memory is not enough to control all of those factors. So psychological safety is really crucial here, not to disrupt this kind of experimentation. So a lot of pair work, group work with no judgment is very effective. But what about AI? Obviously, all the previous things with vocabulary, grammar, and everything, they're still relevant. They contribute to accuracy, they contribute to language development, they provide exposure, so all of that is relevant. Students are also able to play with the prompts a bit more. And well, among other things, they can recur to broad prompting. This is an example from the TESOL International Association blog, which is well quite good for that. But at this stage, students can easily generate similar prompts essentially themselves, well, usually. So they do not have to specify the type of exercise, the type of the quiz to be provided with. They just say it, well, see the way it goes. They might get to explain definitions, they might discuss the use of the word, of the grammar structure, and gradually again prompt the AI tool to respond to the specific questions that they still have, or ask about the aspects of language that are still unclear to them. So their interaction with AI, even if they're typing, even if they're writing, it will become much more like communication, let's say. And then even in class, students could ask some questions about words or language that they need in the process. Well, obviously, if it's not like a task to be assessed. And AI probably will respond, well, more accurately in terms of the style, in terms of the genre, well, the context appropriate level, which means, well, basically that it will be more precise than, for example, I don't know, like a dictionary or like a translator or anything like that. So that is still acceptable and that is still useful for the students anyway. At, well, some intermediate levels, again, like A2 plus, B1, B1 plus perhaps, where psychological safety is essential, such AI tools can also act as kind of an intermediate step to ensure emotional safety. So if you provide, let's say, well, any speaking task, in fact, you can ask your students, especially in mixed level classrooms, to use AI in writing or in speaking, depending on the level, because today there are quite a few tools so that you can already like talk to pretty literally. Some of them you can see on the screen. So students can basically practice with AI first, and only then proceed to practicing with their, well, partners, peers, well, the teacher, if it's a one-to-one class, depends. So this can serve the purpose of differentiation, obviously. And it is better than, well, anything that we can propose, in fact, in terms of useful phrases, sentence frames, etc., because although those definitely they do help, we never know what exactly the students want to say. And there is always a chance that useful phrases will not be that useful at all. So while practicing with AI, students find the language, to say what they need to say. And then, as well as we often do that in groups, they can repeat that task or maybe a slightly modified version of the task with a fellow student or in a group, but being relatively ready and feeling safer. Feeling that they're safe, that they have a safe space, that they already have some kind of a, well, foundation to proceed from, in fact. So depending on the students, on the level, on the task you want them to do, on your aim, of course, you can also simply ask students to brainstorm with AI in order to avoid any potential lack of ideas, which could also prevent them from getting immersed in the task. So obviously there are the usual tools like, well, ChatGPT, Bing, BART, anything. There are also more specific tools already, like, well, AI debate, let's say. Their students do not really need to program it. They already have, well, a range of characters and they can debate with them. They could even act as that character in their future conversation with their partners. Well, just for fun, if appropriate, of course, if appropriate for the task. The idea is that it will reduce, not remove, but reduce the cognitive load because they already have some ideas, they have some language, but as they will see, working with their partners, obviously, the conversation will still be stimulating and perhaps even challenging because it involves another person. This is a crucial factor not in language learning, but in learning to communicate. And you can learn a lot of grammar, vocabulary, phrases, well, collocations, anything. Your language can become quite accurate at that point through the use of AI. Why not? But as soon as you are in front of another person, it is inevitably different. With AI, we're prompting it. So essentially, we control the conversation, and we do not really care about its opinion. It doesn't have one, which is a good thing at a certain point in time. But with the person, we have no control over what the other person is going to say. It is our task to keep the conversation running smoothly. We cannot just, I don't know, like close the window in our browser and leave. Or at the very least, you need to kind of wrap up the conversation somehow. You can have some productive disagreement, and it can also be effective at, well, different, basically, well, at different tasks for business people, for general English, for anything. And I would say that showing that difference to the students, not just telling them, but really showing it to them, it could prove as a wonderful resource for them to understand that you can never learn a language with a machine, or at the very least, you cannot learn a language with a machine only, in fact. And having a person in front of you makes you choose your words more carefully, pick up on the subtle cues that come from your partner, and, well, you need to understand their attitude to whatever you are saying. Even just monitoring your body language, as simple as that. All of that will create some additional cognitive load, or emotional load, if you wish, which could significantly impact linguistic performance, accuracy, even the speed of reaction, because before saying something, even if you're relatively competent in language, you need to understand like what you want to say and what kind of a reaction you want to get. At the very least, to, well, basically to keep the conversation going without creating conflict, unless, well, we want it for some reason. And that basically brings me to the third level, or group of levels again, which are already quite high. I'd say it's like B2, well, B1 plus, B2 and higher. Again, all the previous things, they remain relevant for improving vocabulary, accuracy, anything. So of course that's relevant. But at this point, students often start kind of stagnating. On the one hand, they do not see such a progress as, well, at lower levels, when, let's say, they weren't able to speak first, and finally they're able to make themselves understood. So of course that's very visible. At this level, students usually can express their ideas on most of the subjects, even if, again, their accuracy will vary. They usually don't have any, well, major communication problems. And the only problem here is that our brain is lazy. So at this point, students feel like they're kind of losing motivation sometimes, but that's not exactly what is happening. Because in fact, our brain just does not see a point in learning something more. There is a concept in psychology of decision making, which is a cost-benefit ratio. It's, well, it's kind of broad concept applied in various fields to various extents, but essentially, it means that sometimes, well, when we are making a decision, consciously or subconsciously, we can weigh up the different pros and cons. Sometimes we're doing that, again, less consciously, but when our brain thinks that the benefits of a new experience are not actually worth the effort, and, well, like, I can already speak, why should I do something more, in fact? And often, not always, of course, it depends on the student, on the motivation, on the goals, obviously. But quite often, this kind of a plateau is caused by this cost-benefit block. So what we need to do is to explicitly show our brain what it still has to learn and why it needs it. If at low levels, we were seeking to decrease the cognitive load as much as possible, here it would make sense to increase it at least a bit, to add some constraints, such as even timing. So for instance, I don't know, like speak for a minute exercises, or limit the vocabulary that they can use. The taboo game probably would be a perfect example of that. But going back to AI, how can this help with showing our brain that, well, it still has some things to learn and it could benefit from the effort? First of all, a good technique for that, basically with or without participation of AI, it's recording yourself. Oftentimes, when we are speaking, we are unaware that we're using like a limited range of vocabulary or grammar or syntactic structures, etc. We may not see some mistakes that we're making. Well, depends, in fact. So when basically, when we're listening to our own speech, that becomes much more explicit. And we can see what exactly we need to improve, etc. But again, as our brain is quite lazy, the idea of searching for ways to improve our speech can seem too time-consuming, energy-consuming, overwhelming, whatever. Plus, at times, we are really not sure how to improve the language, and that could also be the case. So here, you can always ask AI to improve your speech. You can either like talk to an AI tool directly. If, for example, you're recording your speech and you want to listen to it again yourself, there are tools that help to convert speech into text. Some AI systems accept audio input as well, like as a file. So basically, it's up to the student to choose. And then the student compares their speech with what AI proposed and reflects on that. What kind of changes it made? What kind of, well, maybe linguistic units that are less obvious for the person it used, etc. And obviously, sometimes AI can also kind of overdo it and create a text which is, let's say, too formal, which is, again, often the case when we ask it to improve the style, let's say. But again, that's up to the student to decide. And this is also part of learning, thinking whether the change is appropriate, in which context it could be appropriate, and where maybe it could be too much, or maybe it's not exactly what the student wanted to say. And that's sometimes that's also the case when, while correcting AI systems, they also change the meaning of whatever was said. So that could also be like a problem, and it's up to the student to reflect on it. So in that case, we also work on the critical thinking of students, yeah, and again, on the communicative aspect of language and language learning. Some of the tools that are available, for instance, like Small Talk to Me, and well, some others as well. And anyway, you can probably program any tool to do that, with varying degrees of efficiency, but still. Such tools can act as like primary screening of your readiness for IELTS or like other international exams. And that doesn't mean that the students necessarily have to take the test in the near future, or at all for that matter. But if you don't just give a speaking task, but ask to speak to an AI tool and see how much your level corresponds to, well, let's say a certain band in IELTS, it could also be, well, quite eye-opening in terms of the various, well, let's say linguistic opportunities that students still have in front of them. In terms of creativity, both linguistic and otherwise, and common fears that we might start thinking like AI or something like that. We could ask students to brainstorm ideas on a certain topic with AI. The same basically as we've already seen before. But then let's say come up with at least 3 to 5 ideas that it hasn't mentioned, or try to disprove those ideas as well as appropriate, again, depending on the task. And that also shows that we cannot rely on the AI output in every single situation. And sometimes it's basically up to us to come up with the language, with ideas, with something that is appropriate to our situation. So, for instance, in business context, it could also be appropriate for example, to well, to use the strategies proposed by the AI and ideas proposed by the AI, but at the same time, think about your specific audience or your specific client or whatever that is. And coming back to the idea that real communication is different from that with a machine, students could be offered also some challenging scenarios. The scenarios that are challenging for whatever reason, linguistically, emotionally sometimes. So obviously, any topics that are, well, where the students are feeling less comfortable, let's say, they will help. But as we know, emotional load and the need for emotional regulation, it also increases the cognitive load. And for that purpose, all kinds of well, interviews could help. Both well, job interviews or otherwise. Persuading a person to, well, to buy your service or to do something for you, just if we talk about general English, provided the person is unwilling to do so. Giving or receiving negative feedback, again, in business or otherwise, doesn't matter. So all of those situations, they could actually make students think a little bit more about the content. And, well, having a realistic scenario, which is already great, students will see the difference in communicating with AI if they're offered to do so. But what is also a good idea is to ask a chatbot for some strategies, to then see that to know the strategy is not the same as to apply it. So essentially, as an example, here are some of the things that ChatGPT suggested for a successful interview for a position of a web designer. Some of them, well, they're mostly linguistic in nature. Others do not have so much to do with language. But in fact, when students are experimenting with them in reality, well, with a partner or partners, they realize that although those strategies, they're useful, obviously, they also realize that not always they're able to successfully, well, to introduce those strategies successfully in a real conversation. And it's not even about the language, though perhaps language sometimes as well, if they need some specific terms or whatever. They do not have, again, any control over the conversation. And they are unsure how to, like, introduce that into a conversation naturally. But after practicing like 2-3 times with different partners over time, they're getting they're getting more comfortable and they're getting more effective, provided they're practicing again with a real person and not a machine. Partially it is due to a reduction of the cognitive load, which is due to the need for, again, emotional regulation, which hijacks our cognitive resource to some extent. And well, it is a skill that is virtually impossible to hone with a machine. In that case, students basically understand that in real communication, even if they already have the language that they need, which is often the case at high levels, yeah, so they have well, quite a good level of fluency and accuracy already. They still understand that sometimes those emotionally challenging situations, like face-threatening situations, any situation where basically where they're feeling less comfortable with the context, with the person in front of them, perhaps, any situational factors will impact their linguistic performance. Sometimes it will reduce accuracy. Sometimes it will make them even, I don't know, well, that happens quite rarely, but still, even forget some word structures that they seem to know pretty well. And again, while they can kind of use the machine to learn grammar, vocabulary, whatever, the use of this grammar, vocabulary, and everything in communication is completely different. First of all, because in one way or another, even if we're not talking about like business communication or professional communication, our communication is always to an extent strategic. And we have a specific goal for our communication, even if it's just, I don't know, to tell a joke. And we are always just, again, as our brain is predicting what is going to, like what we are going to say, it is also predicting what is going to happen next in the conversation. And it is also predicting how the other person, well, what they could say next, or what they could do next, etc. And by predicting both the language and what the context is going to suggest, let's say, we can basically get efficient at communicating. And this is something that, well, machines, they do not really help us with. So essentially, optimization of AI use in language teaching and in teaching, broadly speaking, yes, it is a challenge. However, there is support that only teachers can provide, even at level of tasks to complete, and not just language. There are skills that you can learn only with real people and not with a machine. But at the same time, it would be kind of unjustified to deprive our learners of the opportunity to speed up their learning, to make it more comfortable, less stressful through the use of the AI tools that are out there. Basically today, students often do not have the time, they do not have the years to learn the language, and everything that is useful for them, everything that they can use beyond the classroom, because it is basically where most of the exposure happens today. It's a great way to, well, to make them progress better and faster, and become more independent in their learning. Because actually interaction with AI tools is a great way to also to become more independent, to get better, well, at prompt engineering if necessary, but moreover to ask the necessary questions and to develop the strategies that they need to use in their future learning with or without the teacher. Because at some point the teacher won't be there, and well, that's a little bit the point of learning a language. Thank you very much. And well, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Ganna. That was brilliant. Another amazing session in this strand. There is like so much food for thought. My brain is sort of full actually after today. So I have to go lie down in a dark room after all of this. But brilliant, thank you. There are a few questions in the Q&A, so we've got just a couple of minutes. Actually, some of them are quite related, Ganna, and I think at one point in your session, you did refer to some specific tools that you use, but I think people are kind of asking what you recommend, what's worked best from your point of view. I'm sure, it's not one size fits all, but anything that you have felt in your own experience has worked really well for you and your students that you would recommend. I think that might be helpful to some of the people that have been watching.
Well, I would say, I don't know, for me, it's basically like the choice of the tool. It's also kind of part of the learner developing their autonomy. So obviously, I suggest some tools, like, well, for example, for speaking to the AI, well, we had this, well, small talk to me. I don't, okay, I won't go back to the slide. Like, Elsa, small talk to me, like Gliglish or something like that. Like some of them, well, some of them are somehow free. Others, well, they have some pricing policy. That's another story. But I would say that small talk to me is quite good, and it has quite a range of scenarios uh, where, like, again, you don't need to program AI. It's like already there, so you can just like start a conversation, and
Right.
it will know, yeah, like how to guide you more or less. In terms of, well, just chatbots, I would say that it's a matter of preference
Mm-hmm.
because it's just, well, they all work based on the same principles, and it's more about the prompt than the tool, in
Yeah.
fact.
Okay. Great. I think we're probably all at different levels of use of this in our teaching. So everybody wants the kind of magic bullet answer, like, well, what should I do? Which one should I go for? So I know there were quite a few questions around that. I was, as somebody who works for an assessment board, I was quite interested in the use of AI, and you were saying using that as a kind of tool to um, help students decide if they're ready for a certain assessment. And has that been effective in your experiences? And has it been more getting the student to do their own noticing of what they need to do, or have you sat down with your learners to kind of look at where the gaps are and talk about what they want to achieve depending on the exam that they're taking?
I would say that like the teacher should always be there, like eventually. So obviously, yes, again, all of those things that I've mentioned, they are like part of the course. That doesn't
Mhm.
mean that students are working like with AI only. Of course
Absolutely.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course not. So
Yeah.
it's part of the course, and at some point, again, well, during a session or during a course, etc., obviously they get a feedback from their peers, from me, and well, always that, because that's a must, and that's uh, well, sometimes AI can, well, not sometimes, but quite often it provides error correction quite well. But where they need to move next, what, like what they're still lacking, broadly speaking, yeah, like not based on the specific text or audio file that we've fed into the system. So that's, I think that that's always up to the teacher. Yeah.
That's where the role of the teacher is really important, isn't it? Yes, absolutely. Great. All right. Well, Ganna, thank you. Another inspiring, interesting session. As you can see from the chat, I think everybody got a lot out of that. So thank you so much for joining us as a presenter this year. And just a reminder that all of these have been recorded. So if you want to kind of go back and watch that at a slower pace and try and absorb it all again, you will be able to do so after the conference. We're going to have another short break here, and then we will be moving into our final plenary session with Richard Chin and Danny Norrington Davis on emergent language. So one not to be missed. Certainly hope you will stick around and watch that plenary. Ganna, thanks again. Amazing session. Really enjoyed it. And